I found the note taped to my own front door at 5:15 on a Thursday evening, still wearing my clinic lanyard, still smelling like the hand sanitizer we go through by the liter on the rehab floor. My key didn't fit. I tried it twice, the way you do when something doesn't compute, as if the lock might simply reconsider. It didn't. The note was in Nadine's handwriting. I recognized it before I'd even read the words, because Nadine always writes her capital letters with a little flourish, like she's signing something of consequence. The house is Ashworth family property now. Your things are on the back porch. Graham has nothing to say to you. Please don't make a scene. Ashworth family property. As though she'd been the one paying the mortgage for 8 years. As though the name on the loan approval wasn't mine. Then Graham disappeared from my phone. The contact photo, a candid I'd taken of him laughing at the lake 2 summers ago, just gone, replaced by a gray silhouette. He'd blocked me. My husband of 8 years had blocked me while his sister taped a note to the door I'd picked out. I stood on my own front porch in November, in the cold that settles over Guelph like it means business, and I almost laughed, not hysterically. Not the kind of laugh that's really crying with a different shape. A quiet, certain laugh, the kind that rises up when you're the only person in the situation who knows the full picture. Because Nadine had absolutely no idea what I had done 1 day earlier. She thought she was closing a trap. She had no idea I'd already cleared the floor of it. But you can't understand the laugh without understanding the 11 years. My name is Celeste. I'm 36, a registered physiotherapist, and I've spent my entire career helping people rebuild what's been damaged. Joints, muscles, the specific way a person holds themselves after something in their body has given out. I met Graham Ashworth when I was 25, at a mutual friend's housewarming in Hamilton. He was warm in the way that reads as safe. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He laughed at himself easily, and when the party got loud, he found me in the kitchen and handed me a glass of water without me asking because he'd noticed I wasn't drinking. I married that quality more than I married the man, I think, looking back. The quality of noticing. We married 3 years later. Small ceremony, backyard in September, his parents and mine, a handful of close friends. The maple in my parents' yard was just starting to turn. We bought our house in Guelph the following spring. A 1970s semi on a quiet street near the Arboretum, original hardwood floors, and a kitchen that needed work and a yard that needed more. We adopted a rescue greyhound that summer and named her Biscuit, and she spent her days following sunbeams across the living room floor like a very dignified weather vane. Graham worked in residential construction project management. Good, steady work, but variable, slow in winter, unpredictable when projects stalled. I was full-time at the clinic, building seniority, eventually taking a supervisory role that came with a salary increase that meant I was clearing nearly twice what he made in a good year, and reliably more in a bad one. I didn't resent this. I was raised by a mother who kept meticulous household finances because my father genuinely couldn't, and I'd understood without drama that someone had to hold the thread. I set up the mortgage auto payment from my account. I funded our joint TFSA, the one we'd opened together, where we kept emergency savings. I tracked our credit scores, refinanced when rates dropped in 2022, qualified on my income alone. My name was on everything because, practically speaking, my income was what made everything possible. Graham knew this. We'd discussed it plainly. It wasn't a wound between us, or so I thought. Nadine was Graham's older sister by 3 years, and she had lived 20 minutes away their entire lives, by choice, because some people find geographic proximity to family comforting, and some people find it necessary in a way that's harder to name. From the beginning, She inserted herself into our marriage the way a slow gas leak inserts itself into a house. Not dramatic, barely perceptible at first, and then one day you realize you've had a headache for years. She rearranged the furniture in our living room while we were away for a long weekend because she'd been dropping something off and noticed it didn't flow. She advised Graham on what to wear to my clinic's holiday party. She called him every Sunday morning. Not in a warm, routine way, but in a checking-in way, the kind of call that carries the subtext, "I need to know where you are." And when he didn't answer, she'd text me. Not asking after Graham. Confirming whether I knew where he was, as if she suspected I might be misplacing him. Her weapon, always, was concern. "Celeste, sweetheart, don't you find the clinic hours exhausting? I just worry Graham comes home to an empty house too often." I only say it because I care so much about you both. Every barb filed down to a soft point, so it didn't look like a barb at all. When I was offered a lead therapist position at a larger clinic in Waterloo, more money, more responsibility, a real step forward, I came home excited and told them both over dinner. Nadine set her fork down and said, gently, with her concerned face arranged just so, "But wouldn't that mean longer commutes? Graham's been saying he needs you more present right now." I just think sometimes career becomes a substitute for the things we really need. I only want what's best for you. And Graham said nothing to contradict her, and I turned down the position. I told myself I was choosing my marriage. I was actually being managed. There is a difference. By year 7, I'd stopped seeing most of my friends from before Graham. Not dramatically, but gradually, the way connections thin when you can't easily explain your life and the effort of explaining grows heavier than the connection itself. Nadine had made quiet observations over the years about various people I was close to. She always seemed a little self-involved, don't you think? I just got that vibe. Enough of those observations, repeated softly enough, become the wallpaper of how you see. I understand now that an isolated woman is a manageable woman. I understand Nadine understood that long before I did. Last October was when the ground shifted, though I didn't feel it immediately. I came home on a Thursday evening to find Nadine's car in the driveway, and the two of them at the kitchen table. And the specific quality of the silence when I walked in. Not the silence of people who've run out of things to say, but the silence of people who've been interrupted, landed in my stomach like something cold. There were papers on the table. Graham gathered them into a folder fast, not smoothly. I saw the top edge of what looked like a legal letterhead. "Long day?" he said, too bright. "What's that?" I nodded at the folder. "Just Nadine's condo paperwork, boring stuff." Nadine gave me her warmest smile. "You look absolutely exhausted, sweetheart. Sit down. I brought soup." I sat. I ate the soup. I told myself it was condo paperwork, but that night I lay awake beside him and kept seeing how fast his hands had moved. The next morning, after he left for work, I looked. I wasn't proud of it, and I wasn't not proud of it. I was just a woman who had spent 7 years believing the charitable interpretation and had finally run out of charity. I found what I was looking for in the accordion folder in the bottom drawer of his desk, the one labeled insurance documents that I'd never had reason to open. It was a draft transfer agreement. 12 pages, prepared by someone named Thomas Gillard, a notary public with an office on Stone Road. The language was dense, but the meaning was not. It proposed to transfer Graham's 50% interest in our matrimonial home to Nadine Ashworth, described in the document as a family member receiving a gifted interest, for nominal consideration of $1. There was a sticky note on the cover page in Nadine's handwriting, the same looping script that had signed every birthday card she'd ever given me with love. G. Once this goes through, C has no footing. Talk to Tom about the joint accounts before end of month. We'll be in a clean position by Christmas. No footing. As though I were a tenant who had overstayed a lease. I stood in that small home office in October daylight and felt the specific kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature. The same cold I'd felt at 22, sitting in a hospital waiting room while my mother was in surgery. The cold of understanding that something has already changed and you are only just catching up to it. They were going to transfer the house out of Graham's name, so that in a divorce I couldn't reach his share of it. And they were going to move the joint savings before I understood what was happening. C has no footing. They had built this entire scheme on an assumption about me. That I would be too shocked, too underfunded, too alone to fight back. That the woman who had been making dinner and letting promotions pass and shrinking herself into the shape of the life they preferred, that woman would simply fold. I photographed every page of the draft agreement, front and back, sticky note included. I put it back exactly as I'd found it, folder closed, drawer shut. Then I went to the kitchen and made a full pot of coffee and sat at the table and stayed very still for a long time. I had one colleague I trusted, a PT assistant named Dana, who had pressed a business card into my hand 8 months earlier after I'd said something I shouldn't have in the break room, something small about feeling like I'd disappeared inside my own life. She'd said only, "Keep this. You never know." The card was for a family lawyer. Meredith Park, a partner at a small firm on Wyndham Street. I'd kept it zipped into the interior pocket of my work bag, the way you keep something you don't want to need. I slept about 90 minutes. At 6 in the morning, I got up, made Graham's coffee, kissed him goodbye as if it were any Friday, and said I had an early patient. He didn't quite meet my eyes. Men in the middle of betraying someone often develop a great interest in their shoes. I called the clinic and took a personal day. First one in a year and a half. The moment his truck cleared the end of the street, I began. First, RBC, the moment they opened at 8. I did not close the joint TFSA. A woman who clears out a joint account looks like a thief, and I was not going to hand anyone that story. I transferred exactly half, $22,000 out of our combined $44,000 in savings, into a new individual account in my name only. I have the transfer confirmation time-stamped. I have the original balance statements. Half was mine by any reasonable measure. The other half I left sitting in the joint account, untouched, because I wanted the paper trail to be clean when it needed to be. Spotless. That word became a kind of anchor for me that morning. Spotless. Second, Meredith Park at 8:45. She had a cancellation at 11. Her office was on the 3rd floor above a Vietnamese restaurant on Wyndham, and it smelled like drip coffee and old paper and something faintly floral. She was in her late 40s, with reading glasses she kept taking on and off, and she listened without interrupting, which I appreciated more than I could say in the moment. I showed her the photographs on my phone. She looked at them for a long time. Then she looked at me. "Celeste, is your name on the registered title of the home as it currently stands?" "Yes, both of ours, since we bought it." She sat back. "Then Thomas Gillard, notary or not, has drafted a document that cannot do what they think it does. Under Ontario's Family Law Act, a matrimonial home is a protected asset. Graham cannot dispose of, encumber, or gift his interest in your matrimonial home without your written consent. It doesn't matter what the transfer agreement says. Without your signature, it doesn't happen. Whoever gave them this legal strategy either doesn't understand Ontario family law or is counting on you not to." She tapped Nadine's sticky note with one finger. "And this. A handwritten note documenting the intent to move assets before a divorce, specifically to prevent a spouse from having access. This is evidence of intent. I've been practicing for 19 years, and I can tell you, clients pay me to find things like this. Your sister-in-law wrote her entire scheme on a Post-it. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, I laughed properly. The same quiet, knowing laugh I'd almost laughed standing on my porch. Being born right there in Meredith Park's office on Wyndham Street, in the smell of coffee and printer paper. Because I finally understood the shape of what they'd built. A trap with no floor. A cage assembled around a person who was never actually inside it. They had underestimated every single thing about me, and the underestimating was in writing, time-stamped, backed up to my cloud. Meredith laid out the plan. Document everything. The transfer agreement, the note, 8 years of mortgage payments, TFSA contributions, the 2022 refinance records, send a preservation letter. Don't tip the hand yet. People who believe they've already won get careless, she said. Careless is where I do my best work. I signed the retainer with a hand that had finally stopped trembling. That was one day before I came home to a door that my key no longer fit. I stood on the back porch in the early November dark and looked at the 3 cardboard boxes Nadine had had someone stack there. 3 boxes, 8 years condensed to what she'd calculated I'd have the energy to dispute. My good boots were in the top one. Biscuits, spare leash. A framed photo of my mother that had sat on the bookshelf since we moved in. All of it, handled by Nadine's estimation of who I was. I used the spare key from my clinic keyring, a habit from years of locking myself out of things, and let myself in through the side door. The front lock in the garage had been changed. The side door she'd missed. Of course she had. She'd assumed I'd come to the front, see the note, and leave quietly. That was the version of this she'd planned for. The version where I was exactly who she'd decided I was. They were in the living room. Graham on the couch with his phone, not reading anything on it, just holding it the way people hold things when they need something to do with their hands. Nadine standing near the window, a bottle of sparkling wine on the coffee table, 1 glass poured, 1 not yet. Biscuit was asleep in her bed near the radiator, and she lifted her long gray head when I walked in, tail rising once in greeting, and then settled back. The only innocent party in the room. Nadine saw me first. Something moved across her face in rapid sequence, triumph, then confusion, then a rearrangement into outrage so practiced it came almost automatically. "What are you doing here?" she said, drawing herself up. "You don't live here anymore. I had your things moved." "Did you not get my note?" "I got it," I said. "Ashworth family property, very clear." "I won't apologize for protecting my brother." "I know you won't." I set my bag on the armchair. "Graham, explain to me how you plan to gift Nadine a house that has my name on the deed." Graham didn't look up from his phone immediately. When he did, his face was the face of someone who has rehearsed a conversation and is discovering the actual conversations is something different. "It's complicated," he said. "Tom said the transfer only moves my portion." "Thomas Gillard is a notary," I said. "He can certify documents. He cannot advise you on how to circumvent a spouse's rights under Ontario's Family Law Act. Those are distinct categories. My lawyer clarified that yesterday." Nadine's voice sharpened. "Your lawyer." "Meredith Park. She's been practicing family law in this province for 19 years. She described the document Thomas prepared as fundamentally unenforceable on its face. A matrimonial home cannot be disposed of without the consent of both spouses. It doesn't matter what any agreement says. My name doesn't disappear from this property because you taped a note to the front door." "You're bluffing," Nadine said, but her voice had thinned at the edges. "I photographed the transfer agreement the morning after I found it," I said. "All 12 pages, including the cover page." I took out my phone. I read the sticky note aloud, in Nadine's own cadence. the warm one, the one she used when she called me sweetheart and said she only worried because she cared. G. Once this goes through, C has no footing. Talk to Tom about the joint accounts before end of month. We'll be in a clean position by Christmas. I looked up at her. You wrote your entire plan on a post-it, Nadine, Meredith said, and I'm quoting her directly. People pay me to find evidence like this. Graham had gone very still. Nadine, you wrote it down? There's something else, I said. Something neither of you accounted for. I looked toward the bookshelf between the window and the old stereo unit, at the small white device sitting between a photo frame and a dusty candle. A blink camera. I'd installed it 18 months ago when Biscuit started having episodes at night. She'd had 2 seizures, and I needed to be able to watch her on my phone during early shifts at the clinic when I couldn't be home. I'd set it up one afternoon while Graham was out, connected it to my account, and mostly forgotten to mention it because mostly it just showed a dog sleeping in sunbeams. It had audio. It uploaded continuously to my account in the cloud. It had been recording every conversation in that living room for a year and a half. 3 weeks ago, I said, on a Sunday afternoon, you sat on that couch and went through the plan together. Nadine, you said, and I've listened to this recording 4 times, so I'm confident in the wording. Once the transfer's registered and the accounts are moved, she can't afford to fight it. She doesn't have family close by. She doesn't have money for a real lawyer. She'll panic and she'll go. Graham's face had gone the color of February. And Graham, you said, what if she doesn't just go? And Nadine, you said, then we make her the unreliable one. We've been building that story for years. The furnace ticked. Biscuit sighed in her sleep. We've been building that story for years. Not the transfer agreement, not the post-it, not the block number or the boxes on the back porch. Those words, in Nadine's own voice, time-stamped and sitting in a server tied to my account. 11 years of careful, loving concern. She works too hard. I just worry. She always seems so stretched, and there in their own voices was the blueprint for all of it. It hadn't been concern. It had been construction. A long, patient project. You recorded us, Nadine said, and her voice carried the particular outrage of someone reaching for the only available foothold. In our own home. My home, I said. And Ontario is a one-party consent province for audio recording in a private residence when the person recording is a resident. I checked. Meredith checked. It's admissible. Everything is admissible. That's what happens when you run your scheme out loud in a house that belongs to me more than you understood. Graham sat down on the arm of the couch like someone had removed the bones from his legs. I didn't want, he started. She pushed me. I didn't know it would go this far. You changed the locks while I was at work. I didn't raise my voice. I've learned, through years of working with people in pain, that a calm voice, in a moment of crisis, carries more weight than a raised one. You blocked my number at 3 o'clock on a Thursday so you wouldn't have to hear me when I found out. Don't tell me you were pushed. You chose. You noticed everything about me once. You chose to stop. Here is what happened over the following 4 months, told the way things actually unfold, when the paperwork does the speaking for you. Meredith filed the next morning and sent the preservation letter before noon. The recording and the sticky note did exactly what she'd predicted, produced the kind of documented intent that makes opposing counsel deeply uncomfortable and makes clients very eager to settle before a judge sets eyes on it. Graham's lawyer, an actual family law practitioner this time, took one look at the evidence and advised him plainly that the facts were not on his side, that Ontario's matrimonial home protections gave me full standing, regardless of any transfer attempt that had never been completed, and that the audio recording transformed a civil property dispute into something that could attract a level of scrutiny that nobody in that living room wanted. We divided the marital property. I kept the house. I refinanced it into my name alone, buying out Graham's equity at the appraised value. He received his share. The figure was less than he'd hoped to walk away with from a scheme and more than he deserved from an honest division, and the distinction did not weigh on me. The $22,000 I'd transferred was never in question. Half, documented, time-stamped, moved before any dispute existed. The remaining half of the joint TFSA was divided through the settlement. The record was exactly as clean as I'd needed it to be. Thomas Gillard received a formal complaint filed with the governing body that oversees notaries in Ontario, advising clients on family property law, drafting documents designed to frustrate a spouse's statutory rights, doing so for compensation. These fall well outside what a notary is permitted to do. I don't know the final outcome of that process. I don't lose sleep over not knowing. Nadine is what she always was, I suppose, a person who needed to be the most important high presence in every room and who built that importance by making the other people smaller. I understand it better now than I did. I don't forgive it, but I understand it. Some people mistake control for love. They practice the confusion so long they can no longer tell the two apart. I still live on the same street near the Arboretum, in the house with the hardwood floors and the kitchen we finally renovated before everything fell apart. Biscuit still finds her sunbeam every afternoon and sleeps through the rest of the day with the serenity of someone who has fully sorted out her priorities. I took the Waterloo position in January, the one I'd turned down years ago, because I'd been told I was needed elsewhere. The commute is 25 minutes. It's a good job. It turns out I was always capable of handling it. I'm not telling this story because it ended well for me, though it did. I'm telling it because of what I almost didn't do. I almost put that transfer agreement back in the folder and convinced myself I'd misread it. I almost spent another year choosing the charitable interpretation. I almost stayed exactly small enough to fit inside the story someone else had spent years quietly writing for me. The only thing that stopped me was the same thing that saves most people who find a way out. I had kept one thing they couldn't touch. In my case, it was the financial record. The mortgage statements, the TFSA contributions, 8 years of evidence of what I'd actually built. Whatever else I'd surrendered over those years, I had not surrendered the proof of what was mine. Keep your receipts. In every sense of the word, keep your receipts.